Hi, Corel. Good to see you. How was your weekend? I know we're halfway through the week, but I haven't seen you in a little while. Yeah, sleepy. Yeah, I was very, very sleepy this weekend, too. I have no clue why, but yeah, I think I probably slept like half the evenings, which usually I'm the one who's awake and sister's the one. Oh, that's fine. I know that you usually have stuff going on, or that you are just, as you said, dead to the world, or undead to the world, as it were. I can definitely understand that. Yeah, for whatever reason, this weekend I could not keep my eyes open, even at work on Sunday. I kept, I didn't quite fall asleep against the shelves as I have done once or twice. It's very strange alphabetizing the shelves at the bookstore. Oh, yeah, that'd do it. Yeah. Though it is very weird, like alphabetizing the shelves at work or shelving or whatever, and then all of a sudden you find your face is smashed up against the bookshelf and you're still standing, but you're asleep. Hasn't happened in a while, but that almost happened this weekend. Wow. That is a long time. So that be 1 a.m. for me or midnight? I think you're 2 or 3 hours ahead of me. Okay, yeah, 1 a.m. So yeah, that's, you have been up for 13 hours. Lucky number 13. Well, definitely no worries about, yeah, exactly. No worries about missing Monday. My sister kept me company. She was in chat, so she kept me populated. And then I played some Terraria afterwards. It was very chill. Not, well, actually, a lot happened in the first part of Scarlet Pimpernel. Very, very interesting. And are you familiar with the story? I know I have it on VOD. You can just go listen to it, or I can fill you in. So, it takes place during the French Revolution, and a lot, of course, the Scarlet Pimpernel. Oh, hey, Bright! Thank you so much for the sub. Oh, and I got an emote too. Oh, it's the pretty. Well, I mean, there are many pretty ones, but look at this emote I just got. Those little wishing lanterns. How have you been, Bright? How was your holiday? I'll switch over to this screen. And I hope you enjoyed. You would now have, let's see. I don't remember. Do you have the lurk emote now? Nice. Ate food as usual. Oh, and thank you so much for the bits, Corral. The melting snowman narwhal bits. Mine was all right. Very, very small, chill. Just me and my sister. We did have to go over to my parents' house to get. Oh, okay. Tier 3. Gotcha. But yeah, we had to go over to my parents' house because on Christmas Eve it's traditional in our family to have Swedish potato sausage or potatiskorv and corn pudding. And I had all the makings for corn pudding, but potato sausage, if you're not going to make it yourself, and let's be honest, I'm not going to make the potatiskorv. You have to get it from like a specialty deli, and there are like one or two about an hour and a half's drive away from here, and usually my dad goes and gets that. And so, we asked if he could bring some by. Well, he didn't communicate very well that was going to be happening after they had dinner. He said after 5 o'clock. It was about 7:30, and we're like, dinner's still not here. We should call him. And they were just about to sit down to dinner. So if we were going to eat on Christmas Eve, we were going to have to go drive up there to get it. And I made sure that, I distanced it, and it actually happened to be, they have a roommate there, and it was her birthday, and my mom had made her a cake. So my mom is sitting there at the table, and she's got this big, it kind of looks like some facsimile of a Christmas tree. It was a green tiered stacking cake, well, with green frosting. And she goes, cough, cough, because she's always coughing. We would go into a movie theater, and it'd be all dark. We don't know where, the rest of the family is sat. And then we hear cough, cough, and we're like, oh, it's Mom over there, so we go and find her. Anyways, she coughs right on top of the cake and then said, you girls want some? So obviously, we tossed that at the gas station as soon as we had the chance, because I don't want cake that has been coughed on, especially at, with the current situation going on. But yeah, it was nice and chill. I made ham steak and Brussels sprouts, which is actually, it's my sister's currently favorite meal that I make. So it's nice and festive. Yeah. I don't think she's been coughing so long she doesn't even register that she's doing it. And, it's a good thing she never goes out anymore, because people would just be like treating her as a pariah, which would be hard on her. Anyways, this is part 2 of the Scarlet Pimpernel, and it is, when was this written? Not really sure. Let me see if it says, do I have the page where it says? It was written a long time ago, that's all I know. And I can already tell I'm going to have so much fun reading Sir Percy, who is too foppish to be believed. But anyways, it's set during the French Revolution, when when a lot of the aristocrats were being put to death with a guillotine, and they painted a picture of it in the beginning of the book, which was interesting. And then we find out that there is like a small group of people who are smuggling out some of the aristocrats, and they are being led by somebody who goes by the alias the Scarlet Pimpernel, but they can't tell anybody who that is. Oh, I love your little bits treat emotes. Corel, which tier of emote do you have access to salmon yet? I don't remember what bit amount that is, but I know that you're pretty high. And Bright has the pork emote. There are, I just found out in a couple of days, guess what is going to become public domain? So, of course, we're going to be reading it because it is something that is taught in schools. Yeah. The Great Gatsby. It's actually finally going to be in public domain. I guess it was written in 26 or something like that. 1925 or 1926. Also, one more Agatha Christie is going to be in public domain, and that is The Secret of the Chimneys. Or Secret of Chimneys. And a whole bunch of other ones. I'll have to look them up. But I've been having way too much fun looking at all of the Dover thrift editions of classics, and I have more ideas for stories than I'll probably have time for. But you will have fun with it. And being Dover thrift editions, they're like $4 each, $4 or $5. So Dover, Bantam, Signet, and Puffin are my 4 go-tos when I'm looking for classic books. And then if you can't find them in any of those, then you go for Penguin. But Penguin is who runs Bantam and Puffin. So it all boils down to it. It's all Penguin. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have just met Lord Percy, or Sir Percy. And he's, oh my goodness, he is a character. So here we go. Catwheel is hiding. Enjoy your lurk. Sorry, that was what that was supposed to be. I keep forgetting to change that. All right. Chapter 7, The Secret Orchard. Once outside the noisy coffee room, alone in the dimly lighted passage, Marguerite Blakeney seemed to breathe more freely. She heaved a deep sigh, like one who had long been oppressed with the heavy weight of constant self-control, and she allowed a few tears to fall unheeded down her cheeks. Outside the rain had ceased, and through the swiftly passing clouds, the pale rays of an after-storm sun shone upon the beautiful white coast of Kent and the quaint irregular houses that clustered round the Admiralty Pier. Marguerite Blakeney stepped onto the porch and looked out to sea. Silhouetted against the ever-changing sky, a graceful schooner with white sails set was gently dancing in the breeze. The Daydream it was, Sir Percy Blakeney's yacht, which was ready to take Armand St-Just back to France into the very midst of that seething, bloody revolution, which was overthrowing a monarchy, attacking a religion, destroying a society in order to try and rebuild upon the ashes of tradition a new utopia of which a few men dreamed, but which none had the power to establish. In the distance, 2 figures were approaching. The Fisherman's Rest, were approaching the Fisherman's Rest. One, an oldish man with a curious fringe of gray hairs round a rotund and massive chin, and who walked with that peculiar rolling gait which invariably betrays the seafaring man. The other, a young, slight figure, neatly and becomingly dressed in a dark, many-caped overcoat. He was clean-shaven, and his dark hair was taken well back over a clear and noble forehead. "Armand," said Marguerite Blakeney, as soon as she saw him approaching from the distance, and a happy smile shone on her sweet face, even through the tears. A minute or 2 later, brother and sister were locked in each other's arms, while the old skipper stood respectfully on one side. "How much time have we got, Briggs?" asked Lady Blakeney, "before Monsieur St-Just needs to go on board." "We ought to weigh anchor before half an hour, your ladyship," replied the old man, pulling at his grey forelock. Linking her arm in his, Marguerite led her brother towards the cliffs. "Half an hour," she said, looking wistfully out to sea. "Half an hour more, and you'll be far from me, Armand. Oh, I can't believe that you're going, dear. These last few days, whilst Percy has been away, and I've had you all to myself, have slipped by like a dream. I'm not going far, sweet one, said the young man gently. A narrow channel to cross, a few miles of road, I can soon come back. Nay, 'tis not the distance, Armand, but that awful Paris, just now. They had reached the edge of the cliff. A gentle sea breeze blew Marguerite's hair upon her face, and sent the ends of her soft lace fichu waving around her like a white and supple snake. She tried to pierce the distance far away beyond which lay the shores of France, that relentless and stern France which was exactly her pound of flesh, the blood tax from the noblest of her sons. Pound of flesh harkens back to the Merchant of Venice, and it was a punishment that was decided upon if the merchant was found guilty, then he would need to give a pound of flesh. So that's what that is referring to. Our own beautiful country, Marguerite, said Armand, who seemed to have divined her thoughts. They're going too fast, Armand, she said vehemently. You are a Republican, so am I. We have the same thoughts, the same enthusiasm for liberty and equality. But even you must think that they are going too far. Hush, said Armand instinctively, as he threw a quick, apprehensive glance round him. Ah, you see, you don't think yourself that it is safe even to speak of these things here in England. She clung to him suddenly with strong, almost motherly passion. Don't go, Armand, she begged. Don't go back. What should I do if... Her voice was choked in sobs. Her eyes, tender, blue, and loving, gazed appealingly at the young man, who in his turn looked steadfastly into hers. You would in any case be my own brave sister, he said gently, who would remember that, when France is in peril, it is not for her sons to turn their backs on her. Even as he spoke, that sweet, childlike smile crept back into her face, pathetic in the extreme, for it seemed drowned in tears. Oh, Armand, she said quaintly, I sometimes wish you had not so many lofty virtues. I assure you little sins are far less dangerous and uncomfortable. But you will be prudent, she added earnestly. As far as possible, I promise you. Remember, dear, I have only you to care for me. Nay, sweet one, you have other interests now. Percy cares for you. A look of strange wistfulness crept into her eyes as she murmured, He did, once. But surely, there, dear, don't distress yourself on my account. Percy is very good. Hey, he interrupted energetically. I will distress myself on your account, my Margot. Listen, dear, I've not spoken of these things to you before. Something always seems to stop me when I wish to question you. But somehow I feel as if I could not go away and leave you now without asking you one question. You need not answer it if you do not wish, he added, as he noted a sudden hard look, almost of apprehension, darting through her eyes. What is it? She asked simply. Does Sir Percy Blakeney know does he know the part you played in the arrest of Marquis de Saint-Cyr? She laughed, a mirthless, bitter, contemptuous laugh, which was like a jarring chord in the music of her voice. That I denounced the Marquis de Saint-Cyr, you mean, to the tribunal that ultimately sent him and all his family to the guillotine? Yes, he does know. I told him after I married him. You told him all the circumstances which so completely exonerated you from any blame. It was too late to talk of circumstances. He heard the story from other sources. My confession came too tardily, it seems. I could no longer plead extenuating circumstances. I could not demean myself to trying to explain. And now I have the satisfaction, Armand, of knowing that the biggest fool in England has the most complete contempt for his wife. She spoke with vehement bitterness this time, and Armand St-Just, who loved her so dearly, felt that he had placed a somewhat clumsy finger upon an aching wound. Sir Percy loved you, Margot, he repeated gently. Loved me? Well, Armand, I thought at one time that he did, or I should not have married him. I dare say, she added, speaking very rapidly, as if she were about to lay down a heavy burden which had oppressed her for many months. I dare say that even you thought, as everyone else did, that I married Sir Percy because of his wealth, but I assure you, dear, that it was not so. He seemed to worship me with a curious intensity of concentrated passion, which went straight to my heart. I had never loved anyone before, as you know, and I was 24 then, so I naturally thought that it was not in my nature to love. But it has always seemed to me that it must be heavenly to be loved blindly, passionately, wholly, worshipped, in fact, and the very fact that Percy was slow and stupid was an attraction for me, as I thought he would love me all the more. A clever man would naturally have other interests, an ambitious man other hopes. I thought that a fool would worship and think of nothing else. I was ready to respond, Armand. I would have allowed myself to be worshipped and given infinite tenderness in return. She sighed, and there was a world of disillusionment in that sigh. Armand St-Just had allowed her to speak on without interruption. He listened to her whilst allowing his own thoughts to run riot. It was terrible to see a young and beautiful woman, a girl on all but name, still standing almost at the threshold of her life, yet bereft of hope, bereft of illusion, bereft of those golden and fantastic dreams which should have made her youth one long, perpetual holiday. Yet perhaps, though he loved his sister dearly, perhaps he understood. He had studied men in many countries, men of all ages, men of every grade of social and intellectual status, and inwardly he understood that what Marguerite had left unsaid. Granted that Percy Blakeney was dull-witted, but in some slow-going mind there would still be room for that ineradicable pride of a descendant of a long line of English gentlemen. A Blakeney had died on Bosworth Field. Another had sacrificed life and fortune for the sake of a treacherous Stuart, and that same pride, foolish and prejudiced as the Republican Armand would call it, must have been stung to the quick on hearing of the sin which lay at Lady Blakeney's door. By the way, Republican in this means somebody who is supportive of the Republic, who is, rising up against the aristocrats in Paris, as opposed to what we know as the Republican in the U.S. Let's see. She had been young, misguided, ill-advised perhaps. Armand knew that, and those who took advantage of Marguerite's youth, her impulses and imprudence, knew it still better. But Blakeney was slow-witted. He would not listen to circumstances. He only clung to facts, and these had shown him Lady Blakeney, denouncing a fellow man to a tribunal that knew no pardon. And the contempt he would feel for the deed she had done, however unwittingly, would kill that same love in him, in which sympathy and intellectuality could never have had a part. Yet even now his own sister puzzled him. Life and love have such strange vagaries. Could it be that with the waning of her husband's love, Marguerite's heart had awakened with love for him? Strange extremes meet in love's pathway. This woman, who had had half intellectual Europe at her feet, might perhaps have set her affections on a fool. Marguerite was gazing out towards the sunset. Armand could not see her face, but presently it seemed to him that something which glittered for a moment in the golden evening light fell from her eyes into her dainty fichu of lace. But he could not broach that subject with her. He knew her strange, passionate nature so well, and knew that reserve which lurked behind her frank, open ways. They had always been together, these two, for their parents had died when Armand was still a youth, and Marguerite but a child. He, some 8 years her senior, had watched over her until her marriage, had chaperoned her during those brilliant years spent in the flat of the Rue de Richelieu, and had seen her enter upon the new life of hers here in England with much sorrow and some foreboding. This was his first visit to England since her marriage, and the few months of separation had already seemed to have built up a slight, thin partition between brother and sister. The same deep, intense love was still there on both sides, but each now seemed to have a secret orchard into which the other dared not penetrate. There was much Armand St-Just could not tell his sister. The political aspect of the revolution in France was changing almost every day. She might not understand how his own views and sympathies might become modified, even as the excesses committed by those who have been his friends grew in horror and intensity, and Marguerite could not speak to her brother about the secrets of her heart. She hardly understood them herself. She only knew that, in the midst of luxury, she felt lonely and unhappy. And now Armand was going away. She feared for his safety. She longed for his presence. She would not spoil these last few sadly sweet moments by speaking about herself. She led him gently along the cliffs, then down to the beach, their arms linked in one another's. They had still so much to say that lay just outside that secret orchard of theirs. Oh yes, I'm going to write really quickly. I forgot to post up that video that I promised last time. There is such a really, since we're between chapters, I tell you, there was this really fun video. They made the Scarlet Pimpernel into a musical some years back, and there's an anime called Fruits Basket, and in it, one of the characters is very, fashionable, foppish, and, just silly. And so they took the song about, how men should be beautiful and all of that stuff, and how that's how it is in nature, and it's called That Is Why the Lord Created Man. And they took the song and they put snippets of this character from Fruits Basket in it, and it is just so much fun. Moose with antlers. Oh, yes, I'm actually going to write this. Scarlet Pimpernel, Fruits Basket. So if I can remember to do it, I will put it up on the Discord. There we go. I've written my note. Chapter 8, The Accredited Agent. The afternoon was rapidly drawing to a close, and a long, chilly English summer's evening was throwing a misty pall over the green Kentish landscape. The Daydream had set sail, and Marguerite Blakeney stood alone on the edge of the cliff for over an hour, watching those white sails which bore so swiftly away from her the only being who really cared for her, whom she dared to love, whom she knew she could trust. Some little distance away to her left, the lights from the coffee room of the Fisherman's Rest glittered yellow in the gathering mist. From time to time it seemed to her aching nerves as if she could watch from thence the sound of merrymaking and of jovial talk, or even that perpetual senseless laugh of her husband's, which grated continually upon her sensitive ears. Sir Percy had had the delicacy to leave her severely alone. She supposed that, in his own stupid, good-natured way, he may have understood that she would wish to remain alone, while those white sails disappeared into the vague horizon so many miles away. He, whose notions of propriety and decorum were supersensitive, had not suggested even that an attendant should remain within call. Marguerite was grateful to her husband for all this. She always tried to be grateful to him for his thoughtfulness, which was constant, and for his generosity, which really was boundless. She tried even at times to curb the sarcastic, bitter thoughts of him, which made her, in spite of herself, say cruel and insulting things which she vaguely hoped would wound him. Yes, she often wished to wound him, to make him feel that she too held him in contempt, that she had forgotten that once she had almost loved him. Loved that inane fop. Those thoughts seemed unable to soar beyond the tying of a cravat or the new cut of a coat. Bah! And yet, vague memories that were sweet and ardent and attuned to this calm summer's evening came wafting back to her memory on the invisible wings of the light sea breeze, the time when first he worshipped her. He seemed so devoted, a very slave, and there was a certain latent intensity in that love which had fascinated her. Then suddenly that love, that devotion, which throughout this courtship she had looked upon as the slavish fidelity of a dog, seemed to vanish completely. 24 hours after the simple little ceremony at Old Saint Roch, she had told him the story of how, inadvertently, she had spoken of certain matters connected with the Marquis de Saint-Cyr before some men, her friends, who had used this information against the unfortunate Marquis and sent him and his family to the guillotine. She hated the Marquis. Years ago, Armand, her dear brother, had loved Angèle de Saint-Cyr, but Saint-Just was a plebeian, and the Marquis full of pride and arrogant prejudices of his caste. One day Armand, the respectful, timid lover, ventured on sending a small poem, enthusiastic, ardent, passionate, to the idol of his dreams. The next night he was waylaid just outside Paris by the valets of the Marquis de Saint-Cyr, and ignominiously thrashed like a dog within an inch of his life, because he had dared to raise his eyes to the daughter of the aristocrat. The incident was one which, in those days, some 2 years before the Great Revolution, was of almost daily occurrence in France. Incidents of that type, in fact, led to the bloody reprisals, which a few years later sent most of those haughty heads to the guillotine. Marguerite remembered it all, that her brother must have suffered in his manhood, and his pride must have been appalling, that what she suffered through him, and with him, she never attempted even to analyze. But the day of the retribution came. Saint-Cyr and his kind had found their masters in those same plebeians whom they had despised. Armand and Marguerite, both intellectual, thinking beings, adopted with the enthusiasm of their years the utopian doctrines of the Revolution, while the Marquis de Saint-Cyr and his family fought inch by inch for the retention of those privileges which had placed them socially above their fellow men. Marguerite, impulsive, thoughtless, not calculating the purport of her words, still smarting under the terrible insult her brother had suffered at the Marquis's hands, happened to hear, amongst her own coterie, that the Saint-Cyrs were in treasonable correspondence with Austria, hoping to obtain the Emperor's support to quell the growing revolution in their own country. In those days, one denunciation was sufficient. Marguerite's few thoughtless words anent the Marquis de Saint-Cyr bore fruit within 24 hours. He was arrested. His papers were searched. Letters from the Austrian Emperor promising to send troops against the Paris populace were found in his desk. He was arraigned for treason against the nation and sent to the guillotine, whilst his family, his wife and his sons, shared this awful fate. Marguerite, horrified that the terrible consequences of her own thoughtlessness, was powerless to save the Marquis. Her own coterie, the leaders of the revolutionary movement, all proclaimed her as a heroine, and when she married Sir Percy Blakeney, she did not perhaps altogether realize how severely he would look upon the sin which she had so inadvertently committed, and which still lay heavily upon her soul. She made full confession of it to her husband, trusting to his blind love for her, her boundless power over him, to soon make him forget what might have sounded unpleasant to his English ear. Certainly, at the moment, he seemed to take it very quietly. Hardly, in fact, did he appear to understand the meaning of all she said, but what was most certain still was that never after that could she detect the slightest sign of that love which she once believed he had been wholly hers. Now they had drifted quite apart, and Sir Percy seemed to have laid aside his love for her, and as he would an ill-fitting glove. She tried to rouse him by sharpening her ready wit against his dull intellect, endeavored to excite his jealousy if she could not rouse his love, tried to goad him to self-assertion, but all in vain. He remained the same, always passive, drawling, sleepy, always courteous, invariably a gentleman. She had all that the world and a wealthy husband can give to a pretty woman. Yet on this beautiful summer's evening, with the white sails of the Daydream finally hidden by the evening shadows, she felt more lonely than the poor tramp who plodded his way wearily along the rugged cliffs. With another heavy sigh, Marguerite Blakeney turned her back upon the sea and cliffs and walked slowly back towards the Fisherman's Rest. As she drew near, the sound of revelry and gay, jovial laughter grew louder and more distant. She could distinguish Sir Andrew Ffoulkes' pleasant voice, Lord Tony's boisterous guffaws, her husband's occasional drawly, sleepy comments. Then, realizing the loneliness of the road and the fast-gathering gloom round her, she quickened her steps. The next moment she perceived a stranger coming rapidly towards her. Marguerite did not look up. She was not the least nervous, and the Fisherman's Rest was now well within call. The stranger paused just when he saw Marguerite coming quickly towards him, and just as she was about to slip past him, he said very quietly, "Citoyen Saint-Just." Marguerite uttered a little cry of astonishment at thus hearing her own familiar maiden name uttered so close to her. She looked up at the stranger, and this time, with a cry of unfeigned pleasure, she put out both her hands effusively towards him. "Chauvelin!" she exclaimed. "Himself, citoyen, at your service," said the stranger, gallantly kissing the tips of her the tips of her fingers. Marguerite said nothing for a moment or two, as she surveyed with obvious delight the not very prepossessing little figure before her. Chauvelin was then nearer 40 than 30, a clever, shrewd-looking personality with a curious fox-like expression in the deep, sunken eyes. He was the same stranger who, an hour or two previously, had joined Mr. Jellyband in a friendly glass of wine. "Chauvelin, my friend!" said Marguerite, with a pretty little sigh of satisfaction. "I am mightily pleased to see you." No doubt poor Marguerite Saint-Just, lonely in the midst of her grandeur and of her starchy friends, was happy to see a face that brought back memories of a happy time in Paris when she reigned, a queen, over the intellectual coterie of the Rue de Richelieu. She did not notice the sarcastic little smile, however, that hovered round the thin lips of Chauvelin. "But tell me," she added merrily, "what in the world, or whom in the world, are you doing here in England?" She had resumed her walk towards the inn, and Chauvelin turned and walked beside her. "I might return the subtle compliment, fair lady," he said. "What of yourself?" "Oh, I," she said, with a shrug of the shoulders. Je m'ennuie, mon ami, that is all. I'm bored. They had reached the porch of Fisherman's Rest, but Marguerite seemed loath to go within. The evening air was lovely after the storm, and she had found a friend who exhaled the breath of Paris, who knew Armand well, who could talk to all the merry, brilliant friends whom she had left behind, So she lingered on under the pretty porch, while through the gaily lighted dormer window of the coffee room, sounds of laughter, of calls of Sally and for beer, of tapping of mugs and clinking of dice, mingled with Sir Percy Blakeney's inane and mirthless laughter. Chauvelin stood beside her, his shrewd, pale yellow eyes fixed on the pretty face, which seemed so sweet and childlike in this soft English summer twilight. "You surprise me, citoyenne," he said quietly as he took a pinch of snuff. "Do I now?" she reported gaily. "Faith, my little Chauvelin, I should have thought that with your penetration, you would have guessed that an atmosphere composed of frogs and virtues would never suit Marguerite St-Just." "Dear me, is it as bad as that?" he asked in mock consternation. "Quite," she retorted, "and worse." "Strange. Now I thought that a pretty woman would have found English country life peculiarly attractive." "Yes, so I did," she said with a sigh. "Pretty women," she added meditatively, "ought to have a good time in England, since all the pleasant things are forbidden them, the very things they do every day." "Quite so." "You'll hardly believe it, my little Chauvelin," she said earnestly, "but I often pass a whole day, without encountering a single temptation." "No wonder," retorted Chauvelin gallantly, "that the cleverest woman in Europe is troubled with ennui." She laughed one of her melodious, rippling, childlike laughs. "It must be pretty bad, mustn't it?" she said archly, "or I should not have been so pleased to see you." "And this within a year of a romantic love match." "Yes, a year of a romantic love match. That's just the difficulty." "Ah, the idyllic folly," said Chauvelin with quiet sarcasm. The idyllic folly did not then survive the lapse of weeks? "Idyllic follies never last, my little Chauvelin. They come upon us like the measles, and are as easily cured." Chauvelin took another pinch of snuff. He seemed very much addicted to that pernicious habit so prevalent in those days. Perhaps, too, he found the taking of snuff a convenient veil for disguising the quick, shrewd glances with which he strove to read the very souls of those with whom he came in contact. "No wonder," he repeated with the same gallantry, "that the most active brain in Europe is troubled with ennui." "I was in hopes that you had a prescription against the malady, my little Chauvelin." "How can I hope to succeed in that which Sir Percy Blakeney has failed to accomplish?" "Shall we leave Sir Percy out of the question for the present, my dear friend?" she said dryly. "Ah, my dear lady, pardon me, but that is just what we cannot very well do," said Chauvelin, whilst once again his eyes, keen as those of a fox on the alert, darted a quick glance at Marguerite. "I have a most perfect prescription against the worst form of ennui, which I would have been happy to submit to you, but what? There is Sir Percy." "What has he to do with it?" "Quite a good deal, I'm afraid. The prescription I would offer, fair lady, is called a very plebeian name. Work! Work!" Chauvelin looked at Marguerite long and scrutinizingly. It seemed as if those keen, pale eyes of his were reading every one of her thoughts. They were alone together. The evening air was quite still, and their soft whispers were drowned in the noise which came from the coffee room. Still, Oh, okay, I will. Thank you, Corel. Still, Chauvelin took a step or two from under the porch, looked quickly and keenly all round him. Then, seeing that indeed no one was within earshot, he once more came back close to Marguerite. "Will you render France a small service, citoyenne?" he asked, with a sudden change of manner, which lent his thin fox-like face singular earnestness. "La, man," she said flippantly, "how serious you look all of a sudden. Indeed, I do not know if I would render France a small service. At any rate, it depends upon the kind of service she, or you, want." "Have you ever heard of the Scarlet Pimpernel, citoyen Saint-Just?" asked Chauvelin abruptly. "Heard of the Scarlet Pimpernel?" she retorted with a long and merry laugh. "Faith, man, we talk of nothing else. We have hats a la Scarlet Pimpernel. Our horses are called Scarlet Pimpernel. At the Prince of Wales' supper party the other night we had a soufflé a la Scarlet Pimpernel. Lord," she added gaily, "the other day I ordered at my milliner's a blue dress trimmed with green, and bless me if she did not call that a la Scarlet Pimpernel." Just a little hydration. Chauvelin had not moved whilst she prattled merrily along. He did not even attempt to stop her when her musical voice and her childlike laugh went echoing through the still evening air. But he remained serious and earnest whilst she laughed, and his voice, clear, inclusive, and hard, was not raised above his breath as he said, "Then as you have heard of that enigmatical personage, citoyenne, you must also have guessed and known that the man who hides his identity under that strange pseudonym is the most bitter enemy of our Republic of France, of men like Armand Saint-Just." "La," she said with a quaint little sigh, I dare swear he is. France has many bitter enemies these days. But you, citoyenne, are a daughter of France, and should be ready to help her in a moment of deadly peril." "My brother Armand devotes his life to France," she reported proudly. "As for me, I can do nothing here in England." "Yes, you," he urged still more earnestly, whilst his thin fox-like face seemed suddenly to have grown impressive and full of dignity. "Here in England, citoyenne, you alone can help us. Listen. I have been sent over here by the Republican government as its representative. I present my credentials to Mr. Pitt in London tomorrow. One of my duties here is to find out all about this League of the Scarlet Pimpernel, which has become a standing menace to France, which it is pledged to help since it is pledged to help our cursed aristocrats, traitors to their country and enemies of the people, to escape from the just punishment which they deserve." "Oh, hey, Kickin'!" See, you're in a bookstore reading to all who comes into your domain after 45 minutes of reading. The door opens up slowly and walks in, stomping every step of the way. "I am here. You are here, and welcome. Good to see you as always. At a chapter break, I'll chat a little more. You know as well as I do, citoyenne, that once they are over here, those French émigrés try to rouse public feeling against the Republic. They are ready to join issues with an enemy bold enough to attack France. Now, within the last month, scores of these émigrés come all suspected of treasons, others actually condemned by the Tribunal of Public Safety, have succeeded in crossing the Channel. Their escape in each instance was planned, organized, and effected by this society of young English jackanapes, headed by a man whose brain seems as resourceful as his identity is mysterious. All the most strenuous efforts on the part of my spies have failed to discover who he is, whilst the others are the hands. He is the head, who beneath this strange anonymity calmly works at the destruction of France. I mean to strike at that head, and for this I want your help. Through him, afterwards, I can reach the rest of the gang. He is a young buck in English society. Of that I feel sure. Find that, then, for me, citoyen, he urged. Find him for France. Oh, yes. I understand. I have recently got into Raft, and I was up far too late last night playing. It is so much fun. Marguerite had listened to Chauvelin's impassioned speech without uttering a word, scarce making a movement, hardly daring to breathe. She had told him before that this mysterious hero of romance was the talk of the smart set to which she belonged. Already, before this, her heart and her imagination had been stirred by the thought of the brave man who, unknown to fame, had rescued hundreds of lives from a terrible, often an unmerciful fate. She had but little real sympathy with those haughty French aristocrats, insolent in their pride of caste, of whom the Comtesse de Tournay de Basserive was so typical an example. But Republican and liberal-minded though she was from the principle, now there's an interesting thought in our 21st century American brains. But, hang on. Yeah. I haven't played Subnautica. Let's see. But Republican and liberal-minded though she was from principle, she hated and loathed the methods which the young Republic had chosen for establishing herself. She had not been in Paris for some months. The horrors and bloodshed of the reign of terror, culminating in the September massacres, had only come across the Channel to her as a faint echo. Robespierre, Danton, Marat, she had not known in their new guise of bloody justiciaries, merciless wielders of the guillotine. Her very soul recoiled in horror from these excesses, to which she feared her brother Armand, moderate Republican as he was, might become one day the Holocaust. Then, when first she heard of this band of young English enthusiasts who, for sheer love of their fellow men, dragged women and children, old and young men, from a horrible death, her heart had glowed with pride for them, and now, as Chauvelin spoke, her very soul went out to the gallant and mysterious leader of the reckless little band, who risked his life daily, who gave it freely and without ostentation for the sake of humanity. Her eyes were moist when Chauvelin had finished speaking. The lace of her bosom rose and fell with her quick, excited breathing. She no longer heard the noise of drinking from the inn, and she did not heed her husband's voice or his inane laugh. Her thoughts had gone wandering in search of the mysterious hero. Ah, there was a man she might have loved had he come her way. Everything in him appealed to her romantic imagination, his personality, his strength, his bravery, the loyalty of those who served under him in the same noble cause, and, above all, that anonymity which crowned him as if with a halo of romantic glory. Find him for France, citoyenne. Chauvelin's voice close to her ear roused her from her dreams. The mysterious hero had vanished, and not 20 yards away from her a man was drinking and laughing to whom she had sworn faith and loyalty. "Law, man," she said with a return of her assumed flippancy, "you are astonishing. Where in the world am I to look for him?" "You go everywhere, citoyenne," whispered Chauvelin insinuatingly. "Lady Blakeney is the pivot of social London, so I am told. You see everything. You hear everything." "Easy, my friend," retorted Marguerite, drawing herself up to her full height, and looking down with a slight thought of contempt on the small, thin finger before her. Easy? You seem to forget that there are 6 feet of Sir Percy Blakeney and a long line of ancestors to stand between Lady Blakeney and such a thing as you propose. For the sake of France, citoyenne, reiterated Chauvelin earnestly. Tush, man, you talk nonsense anyway. For even if you did know who this Scarlet Pimpernel is, you could do nothing to him. An Englishman. I'll take my chance of that, said Chauvelin, with a dry, rasping little laugh. At any rate, we could send him to the guillotine first to cool his ardor. Then, when there is a diplomatic fuss about it, we can apologize humbly to the British government, and, if necessary, pay compensation to the bereaved family. What you propose is horrible, Chauvelin, she said, drawing away from him as from some noisome insect. Whoever the man may be, he is brave and noble, and never, do you hear me, never would I lend a hand to such villainy. You prefer to be insulted by every French aristocrat who comes to this country? Chauvelin had taken such sure aim when he shot this tiny shaft. Marguerite's fresh young cheeks became a thought more pale, and she bit her underlip, for she would not let him see that the shaft had struck home. That is beside the question, she said at last with indifference. I can defend myself, but I refuse to do any dirty work for you or for France. You have other means at your disposal. You must use them, my friend. And without another look at Chauvelin, Marguerite Blakeney turned her back on him and walked straight into the inn. That is not your last word, citoyenne, said Chauvelin, as a flood of light from the passage illumined her elegant, richly clad figure. We meet in London, I hope. We meet in London, she said, speaking over her shoulder at him, but that is my last word. She threw open the coffee-room door and disappeared from his view, but he remained under the porch for a minute or two, taking a pinch of snuff. He had received a rebuke and a snub, but his shrewd fox-like face looked neither abashed nor disappointed. On the contrary, a curious smile, half sarcastic and wholly satisfied, played around the corners of his thin lips. All right. Oh, no worries. I'm doing all right. I have a nice little week off to recoup from the holiday retail season, which was the strangest holiday retail season I have ever worked. And I have, I'll take a chance during the break to give the kiddies a treat. A la Carel. But yeah, it was the weirdest. I have worked about 20 of them over about 20 or 21, not all at the same place. 17 of them have been with the bookstore where I work. My very first job was retail in a mall, and my very first day was actually, what was it? It was Black Friday. Yes, Black Friday in a mall. It was rough. So I worked there, and then I worked in another mall for like 1 or 2 years during the holiday season. I was seasonal help, and then this current job. And of course, we didn't have the crowds inside the store. They were lining up outside the store, which was made easier by the street being closed. Like it was sort of like a little plaza out there. We'll see if it continues. All right, let me find Snockins. I think she's asleep. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. We had to park in a fair. I don't mind telling you since I don't live there anymore. I was in Sacramento at the time, and I'm not sure if you're probably not familiar with the area. So the biggest mall there is Arden Fair Mall, and usually we can park near it. But they had a fair there where they'd have the state fair. We had to park there and take the shuttle over to the mall. That's crazy. Well, I'll see if she's asleep. And then if she is, we can wait to the end of stream. You're asleep? You are asleep. Okay, I leave you alone now. Ooh, nice. What flavor pizza are you having? I'm actually eating pizza myself. I'm having the frozen pizza. Actually, there are some pretty good frozen pizzas and I'm having the generic brand, like the store brand one. And it's pretty good. It has like herb on the crust. Pretty tasty. And then I also have cherry turnovers for sort of dessert. All right. Oh, interesting. I've never tried those two together. It seems like it could work though. Like pineapple goes fairly well with other things. Like I've had pineapple in salsa before. That was very good. Because it's one of those flavors that definitely straddles the line between savory and sweet. Because of the tartness, it would fit in either way. Kind of like with apricots too. I once had this really delicious chicken dish that had apricot in it. Oh, yeah, that was good stuff. When I was in college, there was a Papa John's in the area, and they had this special where a large single topping pizza would be at this ridiculously low price, free delivery, and so they had the coupon. So you'd order that, they'd come in on top of the pizza box was the same coupon, so you use that coupon again, college specials. Oh wow, 20 random D&D encounters. 4 campaigns. Oh, nice. Please let us know when you're going to do that. I would love to support you in that. Yes, excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing your Hero Forge too. One of these days, I would like to get a Hero Forge. But, oh, speaking of D&D, I actually saw about 3 or 4 of the people that I used to play D&D with in the last week. Was the what for me or corral kicking? Okay, are you going to be recording the in-person game? That's pretty cool, yeah. I do like how they have come out with a lot of great resources for distance playing of D&D. It'd be nice to play again. I miss it. All right, so while you guys are chatting, I'm going to go ahead and continue. Oh, okay, yes. And I'll reply, I'll get caught up on chat at the end of the chapter. Chapter 9, The Outrage. A beautiful starlit night had followed on the day of incessant rain. A cool, balmy, late summer's night, essentially English in its suggestion of moisture and scent of wet earth and dripping leaves. The magnificent coach, drawn by 4 of the finest thoroughbreds in England, had driven off along the London road, with Sir Percy Blakeney on the box, holding the reins in his slender feminine hands, and beside him Lady Blakeney wrapped in costly furs. A 50-mile drive in a starlit summer's night. Marguerite had hailed the notion of it with delight. Sir Percy was an enthusiastic whip, His 4 thoroughbreds, which had been sent down to Dover a couple of days before, were just sufficiently fresh and restive to add zest to the expedition, and Marguerite revelled in anticipation of the few hours of solitude, with the soft night breeze fanning her cheeks, her thoughts wandering whither away. She knew from old experience that Sir Percy would speak little, if at all. He had often driven her on his beautiful coach for hours at night, from point to point, without making more than 1 or 2 casual remarks upon the weather or the state of the roads. He was very fond of driving by night, and she had very quickly adopted his fancy. As she sat next to him hour after hour, admiring the dexterous, certain way in which he handled the reins, she often wondered what went on in that slow-going head of his. He never told her, and she had never cared to ask. At the Fisherman's Rest, Mr. Jellyband was going the round, putting out the lights. His bar customers had all gone, but upstairs in the snug little bedrooms, Mr. Jellyband had quite a few important guests. The Comtesse de Tournay, with Suzanne, and the Vicomte, and there were 2 more bedrooms ready for Sir Anthony Ffoulkes and for Sir Andrew Ffoulkes and Lord Antony Dewart, if the 2 young men should elect to honor the ancient hostelry and stay the night. Hostelry. For the moment these 2 young gallants were comfortably installed in the coffee-room before the huge log fire, which, in spite of the mildness of the evening, had been allowed to burn merrily. "I say, Jelly, has everyone gone?" asked Lord Tony, as the worthy landlord had still busied himself clearing away glasses and mugs. "Everyone, as you see, my lord. And all your servants gone to bed, all except the boy on duty in the bar. And," added Mr. Jellyband with a laugh, "I expect he'll be asleep before long, the rascal. Then we can talk here undisturbed for half an hour. At your service, my lord. I'll leave your candles on the dresser, and your rooms are quite ready. I sleep in the top of the house myself, but if your lordship will only call loudly enough, I dare say I shall hear." "All right, Jelly, and I say, put the lamp out. The fire will give us all the light we need, and we don't want to attract the passer-by." "All right, my lord." Mr. Jellyband did as he was bid. He turned out the quaint old lamp and hung from the raftered ceiling, and blew out all the candles. "Let's have a bottle of wine, Jelly," suggested Sir Andrew. "All right, sir." Jellyband went off to fetch the wine. The room now was quite dark, save for the circle of ruddy and fitful light formed by the brightly blazing logs in the hearth. "Is that all right, gentlemen?" asked Jellyband as he returned with a bottle of wine and a couple of glasses which he placed on the table. "That'll do nicely, thanks, Jelly," said Lord Tony. "Good night, my lord." "Good night, sir." "Good night, Jelly." The 2 young men listened, whilst the heavy tread of Mr. Jellyband was heard echoing along the passage and staircase. Presently even that sound died out, and the whole of the Fisherman's Rest seemed wrapped in sleep, save the 2 young men drinking in silence beside the hearth. For a while no sound was heard, even in the coffee-room, save the ticking of the old grandfather's clock and the crackling of the burning wood. "All right again this time, folks?" asked Lord Tony at last. Sir Andrew had been leaning evidently, gazing into the fire, and seeing therein, no doubt, a pretty piquant face, with large brown eyes and a wealth of dark curls round a childish forehead. "Yes," he said, still musing, "all right. No hitch, none." Lord Antony laughed pleasantly as he poured himself out another glass of wine. "I need not ask, I suppose, whether you found the journey pleasant this time?" "No, Fred, no, you need not ask," replied Sir Andrew gaily. "It was all right." "And there's to her very good health," said jovial Lord Tony. "She's a bonny lass, though she is a French one, and here is to your courtship. May it flourish and prosper exceedingly." He drained his glass the last drop, then joined his friend beside the hearth. "Well, we'll be doing the journey next, Tony, I expect," said Sir Andrew, rousing himself with his meditations. "You and Hastings, certainly. And I hope you may have as pleasant a task as I had, and as charming a travelling companion." "I have no idea, Tony." "No, I haven't," interrupted his friend pleasantly. "But I'll take your word for it. And now," he added, whilst a sudden earnestness crept over his jovial young face, "how about business?" The two young men drew their chairs closer together, and instinctively, though they were alone, their voices sank to a whisper. "I saw the Scarlet Pimpernel alone for a few moments in Calais," said Sir Andrew, "a few days or two ago. He crossed over to England 2 days before we did. He had escorted the party all the way from Paris, dressed, you'll never credit it, as an old market woman, and driving until they were ready safely out of the city. The covered cart, which had the Comtesse de Tournay, Mademoiselle Suzanne, and the Vicomte lay concealed amongst the turnips and cabbages. They themselves, of course, never suspected who their driver was. He drove them right through a line of soldiery and a yelling mob who were screaming, 'À bas l'aristocrate!' Down with the aristocrats. But the market cart got through along with some others, and the Scarlet Pimpernel, in shawl, petticoat, and hood, yelled, 'À bas les aristos!' louder than anybody. Faith, added the young man as his eyes glowed with enthusiasm for the beloved leader. That man's a marvel. His cheek is preposterous, I vow, and that's what carries him through." His cheek meaning kind of impish, like the nerve, that sort of thing. Lord Antony, whose vocabulary was more limited than that of his friend, could only find an oath or two with which to show his admiration for his leader. "He wants you and Hastings to meet him at Calais," said Sir Andrew more quietly, "on the 2nd of next month. Let me see, that will be next Wednesday. Yes. It is, of course, the case of the Comte de Tournay this time, a dangerous task for the Comte, whose escape from his chateau after he had been declared a suspect by the Committee of Public Safety was a masterpiece of the Scarlet Pimpernel's ingenuity, is now under sentence of death. It will be rare sport to get him out of France, and you will have a narrow escape if you get through at all. Saint-Just has actually gone to meet him. Of course, no one suspects Saint-Just as yet, but after that, to get them both out of the country, faith, 'twill be a tough job, and tax even the ingenuity of our chief. I hope I may yet have orders to be of the party. Have you any special instructions for me?" "Yes, rather more precise ones than usual. It appears that the Republican government have sent an accredited agent over to England, a man named Chauvelin, who is said to be terribly bitter against our league and determined to discover the identity of our leader, so that he may have him kidnapped the next time he attempts to set foot in France. This Chauvelin has brought a whole army of spies with him, and until the chief has sampled the lot, he thinks we should meet as seldom as possible on the business of the league, and on no account should talk to each other in public places for a time. When he wants to speak to us, he will contrive to let us know." The two young men were both bending over the fire, for the blaze had died down, and only a red glow from the dying embers cast a lurid light on the narrow semicircle in front of the hearth. The rest of the room lay buried in complete gloom. Sir Andrew had taken a pocket-book from his pocket and drawn therefrom a paper, which he unfolded, and together they tried to read it by the dim red firelight. So intent were they upon this, so wrapped up in the cause, the business they had so much at heart, so precious was this document which came from the very hand of their adored leader, that they had eyes and ears only for that. They lost count of the sounds around them, and of the dropping of the crisp ash from the grate, of the monotonous ticking of the clock, of the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of something on the floor close beside them. A figure had emerged from under one of the benches. With snake-like, noiseless movements, it crept closer and closer to the two young men, not breathing, only gliding along the floor in the inky blackness of the room. "You are to read these instructions and commit them to memory," said Sir Andrew, "then destroy them." He was about to replace the letter case into his pocket when a tiny slip of paper fluttered from it and fell onto the floor. Lord Antony stooped and picked it up. "What's that?" he asked. "Don't know," replied Sir Andrew. "It dropped out of your pocket just now. It certainly did not seem to be the other paper. Strange. I wonder when it got there. Is it from the chief?" he added, glancing at the paper. Both stooped to try and decipher this last tiny scrap of paper on which a few words had been hastily scrawled, when suddenly a slight noise attracted their attention, which seemed to come from the passage beyond. "What's that?" said both instinctively. Lord Antony crossed the room towards the door, which he threw open quickly, and suddenly, at that very moment, he received a stunning blow between the eyes, which threw him back violently into the room. Simultaneously, the crouching, snake-like figure in the gloom had jumped up and hurled itself from behind upon the unsuspecting Sir Andrew, felling him to the ground. All this occurred within the short space of 2 or 3 seconds, and before either Lord Antony or Sir Andrew had time to chance to utter a cry or to make the faintest struggle. They were each seized by 2 men. A muffler was quickly tied round the mouth of each, and they were pinioned to one another, back to back, their arms, hands, and legs securely fastened. One man had, in the meanwhile, quietly shut the door. He wore a mask and now stood motionless, while the others completed their work. "All safe, citoyen," said one of the men, as he took a final survey of the bonds which secured the 2 young men. "Good," replied the man at the door. "Now search their pockets and give me all the papers you find." This was promptly and quietly done. The masked man, having taken possession of all the papers, listened for a moment or two if there were any sound within the Fisherman's Rest. Evidently satisfied that this dastardly outrage had remained unheard, he once more opened the door and pointed peremptorily down the passage. The 4 men lifted Sir Andrew and Lord Antony from the ground, and as quietly, as noiselessly as they had come, they bore the 2 pinioned young gallants out of the inn and along the Dover road into the gloom beyond. In the coffee-room, the masked leader of this daring attempt was quickly glancing through the stolen papers. "Not a bad day's work on the whole," he muttered, as he quietly took off his mask, and his pale, fox-like eyes glittered in the red glow of the fire. "Not a bad day's work." He opened 1 or 2 more letters from Sir Andrew Ffoulkes' pocket-book, noted the tiny scrap of paper which the 2 young men had only just had time to read, but 1 letter especially, signed Armand St-Just, seemed to give him strange satisfaction. "Armand St-Just, a traitor after all," he murmured. "Now, fair Marguerite Blakeney," he added viciously between his clenched teeth, "I think that you will help me find the Scarlet Pimpernel." Chapter 10. In the Opera Box. It was one of the gala nights at Covent Garden Theatre, the first of the autumn season in this memorable year of grace, 1792. The house was packed, both in the smart orchestra boxes and the pit, as well as in the more plebeian balconies and galleries above. Gluck's Orpheus made a strong appeal to the more intellectual portions of the house, whilst the fashionable women, the gaily dressed and brilliant throng, spoke to the eye of those who cared but little for this latest importation from Germany. Selina Doris had been duly applauded after her grand aria by her numerous admirers. Benjamin Incledon, the acknowledged favorite of the ladies, had received special gracious recognition from the royal box. And now the curtain came down after the glorious finale to the second act, and the audience, which had hung spellbound on the magic strains of the great maestro, seemed collectively to breathe a long sigh of satisfaction, previous to letting loose its hundreds of waggish and frivolous tongues. In the smart orchestra boxes, many well-known faces were to be seen. Mr. Pitt, overweighted with cares of state, was finding brief relaxation in tonight's musical treat. The Prince of Wales, jovial, rotund, somewhat coarse and commonplace in appearance, moved about from box to box, spending brief quarters of an hour with those of his more intimate friends. In Lord Grenville's box, too, a curious, interesting personality attracted everyone's attention. A thin, small figure with shrewd, sarcastic face and deep-set eyes, attentive to the music, keenly critical of the audience, dressed in immaculate black, with dark hair free from any powder. Lord Grenville, Foreign Secretary of State, paid him marked, though frigid, deference. Here and there, dotted about amongst distinctly English types of beauty, one or two foreign faces stood out in marked contrast. The haughty aristocratic cast of countenance of the many French royalist émigrés who, persecuted by the relentless, revolutionary faction of their country, had found a peaceful refuge in England. On these faces sorrow and care were deeply writ. The women especially paid but little heed, either to the music or to the brilliant audience. No doubt their thoughts were far away with husband, brother, son, maybe still in peril, or lately succumbed to cruel fate. Among these the Comtesse de Tournay de Basserive, but lately arrived from France, was a most conspicuous figure, dressed in deep, heavy black silk, with only a white lace handkerchief to reveal the aspect of mourning about her person. She sat beside Lady Portarles, who was vainly trying by witty sallies and somewhat broad jokes to bring a smile to the Comtesse's sad mouth. Behind her sat little Suzanne and the Vicomte, both silent and somewhat shy among so many strangers. Suzanne's eyes seemed wistful when she first entered the crowded house. She had looked eagerly all round, scanned every face, scrutinized every box. Evidently the one face she wished to see was not there, for she settled herself down quietly behind her mother, listened apathetically to the music, and took no further interest in the audience itself. "Ah, Lord Grenville," said Lady Portarles. Portarles? Sure. As following a discreet knock, the clever, interesting head of the Secretary of State appeared in the doorway of the box. "You could not arrive more apropos. Here's Madame la Comtesse de Tournay, positively dying to hear the latest news from France." The distinguished diplomatist had come forward and was shaking hands with the ladies. "Alas," he said sadly, "it is of the very worst. Massacres continue, Paris literally reeks with blood, and the guillotine claims 100 victims a day." Pale and tearful, the Comtesse was leaning back in her chair, listening, horror-struck, to this brief and graphic account of what went on in her own misguided country. "Ah, monsieur," she said in broken English, "it is dreadful to hear all that. And my poor husband still in that awful country. It is terrible for me to be sitting here in a theatre all safe and in peace, whilst he is in such peril." "Lud, madam," said honest, bluff Lady Portarles, "your sitting in a convent won't make your husband safe, and you have children to consider. They are too young to be dosed with anxiety in premature mourning." The Comtesse smiled through her tears at the vehemence of her friend. Lady Portarles, whose voice and manner would not have misfitted a jockey, had a heart of gold and hid the most genuine sympathy and most gentle kindliness beneath the somewhat coarse manners affected by some ladies at that time. "Besides which, madam," added Lord Grenville, "did you not tell me yesterday that the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel had pledged their honour to bring Monsieur le Comte safely across the Channel?" "Ah, yes," replied the Comtesse, "and that is my only hope. I saw Lord Hastings yesterday. He assured me again." "Then I am sure you need have no fear. What the League have sworn, that they surely will accomplish. Ah!" added the old diplomatist with a sigh, "I were but a few years younger." "Law, man," interrupted honest Lady Portarles, "you are still young enough to turn your back on that French scarecrow that sits enthroned in your box tonight." "I wish I could, but your ladyship must remember that in serving our country we must put prejudices aside. Mr. Chauvelin is the accredited agent of this government." "Odds fish, man," she retorted, "you don't call those bloodthirsty ruffians over there a government, do you?" "It has not been thought advisable as yet," said the minister guardedly, "for England to break off diplomatic relations with France, and we cannot therefore refuse to receive with courtesy the agent she wishes to send us." "Diplomatic relations be damned, my lord. That sly little fox over there is nothing but a spy, I'll warrant, and you'll find, and I'm much mistaken, that he'll concern himself little with diplomacy, beyond trying to do mischief to royalist refugees, to our heroic Scarlet Pimpernel, to the members of that brave little league." "I am sure," said the Comtesse, pursing her thin lips, "that if the Chauvelin wishes to do us mischief, you will find a faithful ally in Lady Blakeney." "Bless the woman!" ejaculated Lady Portarles. "Did ever anyone see such perversity? My Lord Grenville, you have the gift of the gab. Will you please explain to Madame la Comtesse that she is acting like a fool? In your position here in England, madame," she added, turning a wrathful and resolute face toward the Comtesse, "you cannot afford to put on the hoity-toity airs you French aristocrats are so fond of. Lady Blakeney may or may not be in sympathy with those ruffians in France. She may or may not have had anything to do with the arrest and condemnation of Saint Cyr, or whatever the man's name is, but she is the leader of the fashion in this country. Sir Percy Blakeney has more money than any half-dozen other men put together. He is hand in glove with royalty, and your trying to snub Lady Blakeney will not harm her, but will make you look a fool. Isn't that so, my lord?" But what Lord Grenville thought of this matter, or to what reflections this homely tirade of Lady Portarles led the Comtesse de Tournay, remained unspoken, for the current had just risen on the third act of Orpheus, the admonishments, sorry about that, I don't know, I had that problems with that word, and admonishments to silence came from every part of the house. Lord Grenville took a hasty farewell of the ladies, and slipped back into his box, where Monsieur Chauvelin had sat all through the entr'acte, with his eternal snuff-box in his hand, and with his keen pale eyes intently fixed upon a box opposite to him, where, with much frou-frou of silken skirts, much laughter and general stir of curiosity among the audience, Marguerite Blakeney had just entered, accompanied by her husband. and looking divinely pretty beneath the wealth of her golden reddish curls, slightly besprinkled with powder and tied back into the nape of her graceful neck with a gigantic black bow, always dressed in the very latest vagaries of fashion. Marguerite, alone among the ladies that night, had discarded the crisscross fichu and broad lapelled overdress which had been in fashion for the last 2 or 3 years. She wore the short-waisted, classical-shaped gown which so soon was to become the approved mode in every country in Europe. It suited her graceful, regal figure to perfection, composed as it was of glimmering stuff which seemed a mass of rich gold embroidery. As she entered, she leant for a moment out of the box, taking stock of all those present whom she knew. Many bowed to her as she did so, and from the royal box there came also a quick and gracious salute. Chauvelin watched her intently all through the commencement of the third act. As she sat enthralled with the music, her exquisite little hand toying with a small jeweled fan, her regal head, her throat, arms, and neck covered with magnificent diamonds and rare gems, the gift of the adoring husband who sprawled leisurely by her side. Marguerite was passionately fond of music. Orpheus charmed her tonight. The very joy of living was writ plainly upon the sweet young face. It sparkled out of the merry blue eyes and lit up the smile that lurked around the lips. She was after all but 25, in the heyday of youth, the daring of a brilliant throng, adored, feted, petted, cherished. Feted means celebrated. 2 days ago the Daydream had returned from Calais, bringing her news that her idolized brother had safely landed, that he thought of her, and would be prudent for her sake. What wonder for the moment, and listening to Gluck's impassioned strains, that she forgot her disillusionments, forgot her vanished love dreams, forgot even the lazy, good-humored nonentity who had made up for his lack of spiritual attainment by lavishing worldly advantages upon her. He had stayed beside her in the box just as long as convention demanded, making way for his Royal Highness, and for the host of admirers who, in a continued procession, came to pay homage to the Queen of Fashion. Sir Percy had strolled away to talk to more congenial friends, probably. Marguerite did not even wonder whither he had gone. She cared so little. She had had a little court round her, composed of the jeunesse dorée, I think that's the youth of the day or something like that, of London, and had just dismissed them all, wishing... No, jeune is, pretty, I think. Yeah. Composed of the jeunesse dorée of London, and had just diminished them all, wishing to be alone with Gluck for a brief while. A discreet knock at the door roused her from her enjoyment. "Come in," she said with some impatience, without turning to look at the intruder. Chauvelin, waiting for his opportunity, noted that she was alone, and now, without pausing for that impatient "come in," had quietly slipped into the box, and the next moment was standing beside Marguerite's chair. "A word with you, citoyenne," he said quietly. Marguerite turned quickly, in alarm which was not altogether feigned. "Lord, man, you frightened me," she said with a forced little laugh. "Your presence is entirely inopportune. I wanted to listen to Gluck, and have no mind for talking." "This is my only opportunity," he said as quickly, and without waiting for permission, he drew a chair close behind her, so close that he could whisper in her ear without disturbing the audience and without being seen, in the dark background of the box. "This is my only opportunity," he repeated, as she vouchsafed him no reply. "Lady Blakeney is always so surrounded, so feted by her court, that a mere old friend has but very little chance." faith, man, she said impatiently. You must seek for another opportunity, then. I am going to Lord Grenville's ball tonight after the opera. So are you, probably. I'll give you 5 minutes, then. 3 minutes in the privacy of this box are quite sufficient to me, he rejoined placidly, and I think that you will be wise to listen to me, citoyenne Saint-Just. Marguerite instinctively shivered. Chauvelin had not raised his voice above a whisper. He was now quietly taking a pinch of snuff, yet there was something in his attitude, something in those pale, foxy eyes, which seemed to freeze the blood in her veins, as would the sight of some deadly, hitherto unguessed peril. Is it a threat, citoyenne? Nay, fair lady, he said gallantly. Only an arrow shot into the air. He paused a moment, like a cat which sees a mouse running heedlessly by, ready to spring, yet waiting with that feline sense of enjoyment, of mischief about to be done. Then he said quietly, Your brother, Saint-Just, is in peril. Not a muscle moved in the beautiful face before him. He could only see in it in profile, for Marguerite seemed to be watching the stage intently. But Chauvelin was a keen observer. He noticed the sudden rigidity of the eyes, the hardening of the mouth, the sharp, almost paralyzed tension of the beautiful, graceful figure. Laud, then, she said, with affected merriment, since 'tis one of your imaginary plots, you'd best go back to your own seat and leave me to enjoy the music. And with her hand she began to beat time nervously against the cushion of the box. Selina Storace was singing the Che Faro to an audience that hung spellbound before the prima donna's lips. Chauvelin did not move from his seat. He quietly watched that tiny nervous hand, the only indication that his shaft had indeed struck home. Well, she said suddenly and irreverently, and with the same feigned unconcern. Well, citoyenne, he replied placidly. About my brother? I have news of him for you, then, which, I think, will interest you. But first let me explain, may I? The question was unnecessary. He felt, though Marguerite still held her head steadily averted from him, that her every nerve was strained to hear what he had to say. The other day, citoyenne, he said, I asked for your help. France needed it, and I thought I could rely on you, but you gave me your answer. Since then, the exigencies of your own affair and your own social duties have kept us apart, although many things have happened. To the point, I pray you, citoyenne, she said lightly. The music is entrancing, and the audience will get impatient of your talk. One moment, citoyenne. The day on which I had the honor of meeting you at Dover, and less than an hour after I had your final answer, I obtained possession of some papers, which revealed another of those subtle schemes for the escape of a batch of French aristocrats. That traitor de Tournay, amongst others, all organized by that arch-meddler, the Scarlet Pimpernel. Some of the threads, too, of his mysterious organization have come into my hands, but not all, and I want you, nay, you must help me to gather them together. Marguerite seemed to have listened to him with marked impatience. She now shrugged her shoulders and said gaily, Man, have I not already told you that I care not about your schemes or about the Scarlet Pimpernel, and had you not spoken about my brother, a little patience, I entreat, citoyenne, he continued imperturbably. 2 gentlemen, Lord Antony Dewhurst and Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, were at the Fisherman's Rest at Dover that same night. I know, I saw them there. They were already known to be spies, known to my spies as members of that accursed league. It was Sir Andrew Ffoulkes who escorted the Comtesse de Tournay and her children across the Channel. When the two young men were alone, my spies forced their way into the coffee-room of the inn, gagged and pinioned the two gallants, seized their papers, and brought them to me. In a moment she had guessed the danger. Papers? Had Armand been imprudent? The very thought struck her with nameless terror. Still, she would not let this man see that she feared. She laughed gaily and lightly. "Faith, your impudence passes belief," she said merrily. "Robbery and violence in England, in a crowded inn. Your men might have been caught in the act." What if they had? They had children of France, and have been trained by your humble servant. Had they been caught, they would have gone to jail, or even to the gallows, without a word of protest or indiscretion. At any rate, it was well worth the risk. Crowded inn is safer for these little operations than you think, and my men have experience. "Well, in those papers?" she said carelessly. "Unfortunately, though they have given me a cognizance of certain names, certain movements, enough, I think, to thwart their projected coup for the moment, it would only be for the moment, and still leaves me in ignorance of the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel." "La, my friend," she said with the same assured flippancy of manner, "then you are where you were before, aren't you? You can let me enjoy the last strophe of the aria. Faith," she added ostentatiously, smothering her imaginary yawn. "Oh, had you not spoken about my brother! I'm coming to him now, citoyenne. Among the papers there was a letter to Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, written by your brother Saint-Just. And, well, that letter shows him to be not only in sympathy with the enemies of France, but actually a helper, if not a member of the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel." The blow had been struck at last. All along Marguerite had been expecting it. She would not show fear. She was determined to seem unconcerned, flippant even. She wished, when the shock came, to be prepared for it, to have all her wits about her, those wits which had been nicknamed the keenest in Europe. Even now she did not flinch. She knew that Chauvelin had spoken the truth. The man was too earnest, too blindly devoted to the misguided cause she had at heart, too proud of his countrymen, of those makers of revolutions, to stop to low, purposeless falsehoods. That letter of Armand's, foolish, imprudent Armand, was in Chauvelin's hands. Marguerite knew that as if she had seen the letter with her own eyes, and Chauvelin would hold that letter for purposes of his own, until it suited him to destroy it, or to make use of it against Armand. All that she knew, and yet she continued to laugh more gaily, more loudly than she had done before. "La, man," she said, speaking over her shoulder and looking him full and squarely in the face, "did I not say it was some imaginary plot? Armand in league with that enigmatic Scarlet Pimpernel. Armand busy helping those French aristocrats whom he despises. Faith, the tale does infinite credit to your imagination." "Let me make my point clear, citoyenne," said Chauvelin with the same unruffled calm. "I must assure you that Saint-Just is compromised beyond the slightest hope of pardon." Inside the orchestra box all was silent for a moment or two. Marguerite sat straight upright, rigid and inert, trying to think, trying to face the situation, to realize what had best be done. In the house, Doris had finished the aria, and was even now bowing in her classic garb, but in approved 18th century fashion, to the enthusiastic audience who cheered her to the echo. "Chauvelin," said Marguerite Blakeney at last, quietly, and without the touch of bravado which had characterized her attitude all along. "Chauvelin, my friend, shall we try to understand one another? It seems that my wits have become rusty by contrast with this damp climate. Now tell me, you are very anxious to discover the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel, isn't that so? France's most bitter enemy, citoyen, all the more dangerous as he works in the dark. All the more noble, you mean? Well, and you would now force me to do some spying for you in exchange for my brother Armand's safety, is that it? Fie, 2 very ugly words, fair lady, protested Chauvelin urbanely. There can be no question of force, and the service which I would ask of you in the name of France would never be called by the shocking name of spying. At any rate, that is what it is called over here, she said dryly. That is your intention, is it not? My intention is that you yourself win a free pardon for Armand St-Just by doing me a small service. What is it? Only watch for tonight, citoyen St-Just, he said eagerly. Listen, among the papers which were found about the person of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, there was a tiny note. See, he added, taking a tiny scrap of paper from his pocketbook and handing it to her. It was the same scrap of paper which 4 days ago the 2 young men had been in the act of reading, at the very moment when they were attacked by Chauvelin's minions. Marguerite took it mechanically and stopped to read it. There were only 2 lines, written in a distorted, evidently disguised handwriting. She read them half aloud. Remember, we must not meet more often than is strictly necessary. You have all instructions for the 2nd. If you wish to speak to me again, I shall be at G's ball. What does it mean? She asked. Look again, citoyen, and you will understand. There is a device here in the corner, a small red flower. Yes? Scarlet Pimpernel, she said eagerly. And G's ball means Grenville's ball. You will be at my Lord Grenville's ball tonight. That is how I interpret the note, citoyen, concluded Chauvelin blandly. Lord Antony Dewart and Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, after they were pinioned and searched by my spies, were carried by my orders to a lonely house on the Dover Road, which I had rented for the purpose. There they remained close prisoners until this morning, but having found this tiny scrap of paper, my intention was that they should be in London, in time to attend my Lord Grenville's ball. You see, do you not, that they must have a great deal to say to their chief, and thus they will have an opportunity of speaking to him tonight, just as he directed them to do. Therefore, this morning, those 2 young gallants found every bar and bolt open in that lonely house on the Dover Road, their jailers disappeared, and 2 good horses standing ready saddled and tethered in the yard. I have not seen them yet, but I think we may safely conclude that they did not draw rein until they reached London. Now you see how simple it all is, citoyen. It does seem simple, doesn't it? She said, with a final bitter attempt at flippancy. Well, you want to kill a chicken, you take hold of it, then you wring its neck. It's only the chicken who does not quite find it quite so simple. Now you hold a knife at my throat and a hostage for my obedience. You find it simple. I don't. Nay, citoyen, I offer you a chance of saving the brother you love from the consequences of his own folly. Marguerite's face softened. Her eyes at last grew moist as she murmured half to herself, "The only being in the world who has loved me truly and constantly." "But what do you want me to do, Chauvelin?" she said with a word of despair in her tear-choked voice. "In my present position, it is well nigh impossible." "Nay, citoyen," he said dryly and relentlessly, not heeding that despairing childlike appeal which might have melted the heart of stone. "As Lady Blakeney, no one suspects you, and with your help tonight, I may, who knows, succeed in finally establishing the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel. You are going to the ball anon. Watch for me there, citoyen. Watch and listen. You can tell me if you hear a chance word or whisper, You can note every one to whom Sir Andrew Ffoulkes or Lord Anthony Dewart will speak. You are absolutely beyond suspicion now. The Scarlet Pimpernel will be at Lord Grenville's ball tonight. Find out who he is, and I will pledge the word of France that your brother shall be safe." Chauvelin was putting the knife to her throat. Marguerite felt herself entangled in one of those webs from which she could hope for no escape. A precious hostage was being held for her obedience, for she knew that this man would never make an empty threat. No doubt Armand was already signaled to the Committee of Public Safety as one of the suspects. He would not be allowed to leave France again, and would be ruthlessly struck if she refused to obey Chauvelin. For a moment, woman-like, she hoped to temporize. She held out her hand to this man whom she now feared and hated. "I promise to help you in this matter, Chauvelin," she said pleasantly. "Will you give me that letter of Saint-Just's?" "If you render me useful assistance tonight, citoyenne," he replied with a sarcastic smile, "I will give you that letter tomorrow." "You do not trust me?" "I trust you absolutely, dear lady, but Saint-Just's life is forfeit to his country. It rests with you to redeem it." "I may be powerless to help you," she pleaded, "were I ever so willing." "That would be terrible indeed," he said quietly, "for you and for Saint-Just." Marguerite shuddered. She felt that from this man she could expect no mercy. All-powerful, he held the beloved life in the hollow of his hand. She knew him too well not to know that. If he failed in gaining his own ends, he would be pitiless. She felt cold in spite of the oppressive air of the opera house. The heart-appealing strains of the music seemed to reach her as from a distant land. She drew her costly lace scarf up around her shoulders and sat silently watching the brilliant scene as if in a dream. For a moment her thoughts wandered away from the loved one who was in danger to that other man who also had claim to her on her confidence and her affection. She felt lonely, frightened for Armand's sake. She longed to seek comfort and advice from someone who would know how to help and console. "Oh, hello." "Quite all right, I understand. Storytime is perfect for falling asleep." Sir Percy Blakeney had loved her once. He was her husband. Why should she stand alone through this terrible ordeal? He had very little brains, it is true, but he had plenty of muscle. Surely, if she provided the thought, and he the manly energy and pluck, together they could outwit the astute diplomatist, and save the hostage from his vengeful hands, without imperiling the life of the noble leader of that gallant little band of heroes. Sir Percy knew Saint-Just well. He seemed attached to him. She was sure that he could help. Chauvelin was taking no further heed of her. He had said his cruel either-or, and left her to decide. He, in his turn, now, appeared to be absorbed in the soul-stirring melodies of Orpheus, and was beating time to the music with his sharp, ferret-like head. A discreet rap at the door roused Marguerite from her thoughts. It was Sir Percy Blakeney, tall, sleepy, good-humored, and wearing that half-shy, half-inane smile which just now seemed to irritate her every nerve. "Your chair is outside, my dear," he said, with his almost exasperated drawl. "I suppose you will want to go to that damned ball. Excuse me, Monsieur Chauvelin, I had not observed you." He extended two slender white fingers towards Chauvelin, who had risen from when Sir Percy entered the box. "Are you coming, my dear?" "Hush!" came an angry remonstrance from different parts of the house. "Demmed impudence," commented Sir Percy with a good-natured smile. Marguerite sighed impatiently. Her last hope seemed suddenly to have vanished away. She wrapped her cloak round her and without looking at her husband. "I'm ready to go," she said, taking his arm. At the door of the box she turned and looked straight at Chauvelin, who, with his chapeau bras under his arm and a curious smile round his thin lips, was preparing to follow the strangely ill-assorted couple. "It is only au revoir, Chauvelin," she said pleasantly. "We shall meet at my Lord Grenville's ball anon." And in her eyes the astute Frenchman read, no doubt, something which caused him profound satisfaction, for with a sarcastic smile he took a delicate pinch of snuff. Then, having dusted his dainty lace jabot, he rubbed his thin, bony hands contentedly together. All right, we've come to the end of story time, and now I will redeem your points. Let's see. Oh, nice. All right, let's do... Okay, this is an interesting one. I'll actually read two of them. South America revolutionary Simón Bolívar was at various times president of Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. And then following that up, Venezuela is Spanish for Little Venice. So that is the random fact. Let me go grab Snockings for her treat. Snockings. Here we go. Hi, you're already awake. Corral's giving you a treat. Come on. Nice. All right, here you go, Snockings. This is from, hey, they're over here. This is from Corral. And she thanks you. All right. So, I'm going to end the Storytime stream here. So let me refresh my memory about next month's schedule, because this is the last stream for 2020. The next stream is going to be on Sunday. So anyways, our schedule for the upcoming month is Sundays we're doing story time, and then I didn't have a consistent second day off. So let's see. So next week it's going to be Sunday and Thursday. And then nope, Snockings, this is my water, it's not yours. So it's going to be the first and last week is going to be Sunday, Thursday, and then the second and third week is going to be Sunday, Wednesday. So don't worry, I'll post reminders about an hour before I do my stream. So then we'll continue with, this is a fun book so far. I'm enjoying it. And then I'm going to come back with a game stream. And I think I'm going to do some Terraria. So I'll take a little break. Please feel free to take a break yourself. I'll be back in a little bit, and I will let you know when I am. See you in a bit. Bye.